Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The Andy Ruiz Jr. and Anthony Joshua weigh-in has thrown up a massive shock. Andy Ruiz Jr. coming in very heavy for this fight, this rematch at Diriyah Stadium, December 7th. He is weighing 283.7 pounds, 15 pounds heavier than the first fight in June, and that's despite a 3-month cap, and that is his highest weight since 2009. He's only got a couple of weights higher than that, and that was at the very start of his professional career. So 283 pounds on the scale, 15 more than June 1st. This is certainly going to get people talking and perhaps reassessing their picks, and I'll come to that in a second. But first, Anthony Joshua, he also weighed in, and he was actually 10 pounds less than he was for the first fight, 237 pounds on the scale. That's his lightest weight since 2014. So Joshua and Ruiz having very different weigh-ins, and with Ruiz you knew it was going to be a decent number when he hopped on the scales and didn't take his singlet off, and that's always a telltale sign that a fighter doesn't want to show their stomach, and generally they're going to come in relatively heavy, and in this case he has. And certainly there will be people asking questions about what has he been doing, why is that weight so high, what's been happening in training camp, or is this a situation where as he's tapered, he's put on weight? Because certainly Anthony Joshua's done that before. He put on 10 pounds ahead of the Carlos Takam fight in fight week. So Andy Ruiz, is this something of a similar ilk? Because you have to ask yourself, from a few weeks ago, you can actually go find different photos where he looks slimmer in the face and trimmer overall, but the last couple of weeks he's been putting some more beef back on, and clearly a bit of it too, weighing in at 283 pounds. And I know that there will be some people who will say, well, hang on, he was heavy for the first fight, 268 pounds. He stated he wanted to come in strong, heavy, etc. And ultimately that paid dividends to some extent in that first fight. But adding another 15 pounds, and that's not going to necessarily just be muscle, adding another 15 pounds, what is the actual gain for him here? Because obviously on the negative side, it's easy to see that later in this fight, if it goes that deep, stamina could potentially become an issue. And Ruiz Jr. has, say, in the Joseph Parker fight, which wasn't terribly high volume, was gassing a bit in that fight towards the end. But he was 255 pounds, and that was a 12-round fight. That was back in 2016. So now he's 283.7. Obviously, I think we know what his strategy is going to be. He wants to take Joshua out in the first half of the fight. I think that much is clear, that he wants to have as much meat on his punches. Maybe it wasn't intended to come in this heavy, that he was going to come in heavy, but I don't think anyone saw this necessarily coming in terms of a weight in the 280s. Earlier in fight week, he had spoken about potentially coming in somewhere around 267 or 268, which 268 was his fight weight from the first fight. But this is 15 pounds heavier, and certainly more than a surprise for me, and I'm sure for you out there. How does this actually influence how you see the fight playing out? Because if Anthony Joshua can box effectively, you can sort of see a strategy where he knows Andy Ruiz Jr. is probably going to tire if the fight wears on. If he can get out of the first half a dozen rounds or so, he might be able to start taking over to some extent, exploit potential stamina issues with Andy Ruiz Jr. being at this much heavier weight. And it would be unwise just to dismiss this and go, oh, well, Andy Ruiz Jr.'s never had stamina issues. He's only had 2 fights previously where he's weighed more than 283.7 pounds. And that was the first fights of his career. Obviously, not the sort of caliber of opposition he's facing in Joshua, who's come in a lean, mean sort of condition. He looks, visibly much trimmer, and he is overall less bulky. The whole sort of weightlifter type criticisms that he's had before, it's apparent they were telling the truth, that he spent a lot more time in the gym, less weights, more boxing, focusing on boxing skills, a lot of sparring, and that sort of shows in his physique. So they've made adjustments for this rematch. And if you look at this, Joshua is actually 46 pounds less than Andy Ruiz Jr. for this fight. That's a massive weight advantage for Andy Ruiz Jr. Can he use that extra bulk to his advantage? Will he be able to take Joshua out in that early part of the fight? I'm not completely discounting Ruiz hanging around and being able to, do things in the later rounds, but certainly at that weight, in this sort of fight, at this level, I think for Joshua, it's a good thing that Ruiz has come in this heavy. That's all I'll say about that. But what did you make of it? I think, not a lot of us saw that sort of weight coming, especially early in training camp where Andy Ruiz Jr. looked visibly skinnier than he does today. But obviously, maybe it was a ruse to some extent. But what do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. I'm out.